What's up everybody and welcome to another edition of AGR's Pop Culture Reviews. Now this review was actually pretty interesting to me. In many ways, I was really nostalgic. It took me back to my days on the Xbox 360 when I played the original Prey game. Yes, I'm old enough to remember that game. Now, what made that game very unique was several reasons. Yes, it was a first-person shooter, but it really showcased the power of the 360 at the time. What also made it revolutionary is definitely in its story and its overall narrative, particularly with the setting, which took place in the southwest region of the United States. But also, they made a bold move and a bold decision choice in terms of the protagonist and made him a Native American. Now, if any of you have followed or kept up with the ancient astronaut theory, and the writings of people like Kurt Von Däniken, particularly Chariots of the Gods, you'll understand why that game was pretty unique, incorporating the folklore of Native Americans and extraterrestrials. According to the legends of the Hopi Indians, they had interactions with people that came from the heavens called the Anunnaki. And back then, to me, exploring that narrative was so awesome and so fascinating, and one of the reasons that I think that game was highly underrated at the time. Now, this game is not a sequel to the original, and it's not even a spiritual successor, so to speak. It's actually a reimagining of the original game. Now, those of us who have been anticipating the release of this title for some time know that this game is actually completely different from what they had originally imagined when we saw that footage earlier this year. Now, as you already know guys, this is the age of the interwebs, and we can argue all day and go back and forth about what should have come out. But we have to focus on what actually came out, and this is the brainchild of Bethesda Studios and Arkane Studios, most recently known for their critically acclaimed Dishonored series. Having said all that, this is my official review of the game, Prey. Let's take a closer look. You know, as a historian, one of the things that I absolutely love in my video games is alternate realities, which is probably why I love the Fallout series so much, and this one asks a very interesting question. What if President Kennedy had never been assassinated and allowed to accelerate the space race? In this version of Prey, you take control of Morgan Yu, a scientist on board a space station called the Talos 1, and you soon realize that things are not exactly as they're supposed to be. You wake up in the year 2030, and essentially you've been Groundhog Day. You've come to find out that you've been reliving the same day over and over again as part of a simulation and scientific experiment. And of course, in true sci-fi fashion, you have no memories of what happened before. Now, this is not the most original concept that I've seen before. Actually, it's not original at all, but the way that they do it has some interesting aspects to it. Now, one of the reasons that I can honestly say that is definitely how they've rolled out this game immediately from the beginning. It was really freaking cool. Very stylish, I have to say. And you know what? In many ways, it reminded me of like a Michael Mann video or even one of his movies. It was just so freaking cool. I also have to add that the music and the overall soundtrack in this game, at least initially, is very impressive, and it reminds me of something from M38's Midnight City or even Empire of the Sun. Really freaking cool, guys. Now, if I had to summarize this game in a couple of sentences, I would definitely say something like BioShock or even System Shock in space, which is kind of interesting. And you know what? If they ever do another BioShock game anytime soon, I think the next evolution of where they want the setting to be will be somewhere in space. And that's what we have here. Now, the current trend in video games is to give you a couple of options of what kind of character you want to be. Now, before you guys get all excited, this is not a character creation model, and it doesn't allow for a lot of actually, to be honest with you, it's no customization. You just get to pick whether you want to be a male or female, and that's about it, guys. But it's still nice that you have the option. Now, I did get to do an initial playthrough and a half, and based on what I've seen so far, there is really no difference in what happens if you're a male or a female, so you don't have to worry about that, guys. Now, for those of you who played the original game on the 360, you might be a little bit disappointed in what this game has to offer. It's a little bit less action-oriented as a first-person shooter, and it encourages a lot more exploration, and there are some RPG elements, albeit somewhat superficial. So you are going to have resources that you do have to gather, and you'll find weapons strewn throughout the space station. And that's another thing that I have to kind of remark on. You're going to spend a lot of time on this space station. And, you know, depending on whether or not you like that, The atmosphere is good because it does seem claustrophobic, but again, it is a really big departure from the original game. There's also a lot of backtracking in this game. You're going to have areas which you previously couldn't access because you didn't have certain components or certain upgrades, and then once you have them, very similar to Metroid, you'll be able to access those areas. So just keep in mind that you will be revisiting parts of the space station actually several times, so keep that in mind, guys. There's one more thing to note, that this game has such a strong sense of isolation. There are not too many human characters throughout the space station, except for the rotting corpses that you'll find along the way, and you'll gather resources from them. And what I did notice is something that got really repetitive is you're going to be constantly collecting these damn key cards, which gets old very quickly. And this is going to sound really strange in a first-person shooter, but to me, the weakest part of this game was definitely in the combat, particularly using the weapons. Now, it's cool that there's a lot of variety and customization that you can use with your weapons, and if you're smart, if you explore a lot, you'll be rewarded and you'll get these weapons early on. I know I'm going to catch a lot of heat for this, and I hate that I have to say this, but I think I've been really spoiled by the Call of Duty games and the precision of their weapons and really putting them to the forefront. But here, the weapons are kind of sloppy and imprecise. In many cases, I just resorted to using my melee weapon as a way of defending myself because of the inaccuracy of the weapons. Now, the main adversary in this game is an alien organism known as a Typhon, and they vary in class, size, and strength. Now, the one that I found most problematic was definitely a type of alien known as a Mimic. Now, they're named that for a reason. They can actually mimic everyday objects that you find throughout the space station. You have to be very careful, because as you're gathering resources, you might pick up something that you think will help you that's strewn throughout the space station, and it turns out to be a Mimic. And trust me guys, these things will attack you relentlessly, and they're pretty strong. So it really amps up that sense of paranoia where you don't know if you're picking up an enemy or something that you can use to help you throughout the space station. Now, you're not completely alone on this space station. You don't have a human companion, but you do have an AI companion that occasionally talks to you and sends you messages. Her name is January, and most of the time she's pretty helpful, giving you information. What I did notice though, and I don't know if this is just a game glitch, I tried to change in the settings to try to up the volume of her voice, because many times I know that she was trying to give me critical information. Unfortunately, I couldn't hear what the hell she was saying. Now, I tried several times to fix this, and it looks like it's just a glitch in the game, guys, which was kind of a pain in the ass. If you recall, very similar to BioShock's plasmids, you do have a form of currency here in order for you to upgrade your skills and abilities, and they come in the form of neuromods. These neuromods can be found strewn throughout the space station, and if you're patient and take your time, you'll be able to find all of them and level up your character very quickly. Now, one of the aspects of this game that I found very impressive was definitely in the diversity of its leveling system. Now, it's separated into 3 major subsets: scientist, engineer, and security, and those then branch out into other subsets, which makes for a lot of diversity in terms of how you want to customize your character. In addition to your neuromods, you also have abilities that you can gain by scanning the aliens that are on board the space station. So the more you know about them and their abilities, the more you'll be able to hone their powers and use them against them. You might even be able to use the power of mimicry in order to hide yourself in a pinch. So it's one of those things, or one of those aspects, that makes this gameplay very unique and sets it apart from other first-person shooters. Well guys, we are on a space station, and it looks like there's always going to be some contrived need to go outside of the space station in a zero-gravity suit in order to explore space. And that's what happens here, but it seems to me like this was just tacked on because they wanted to check it off a box or something like that. I didn't find it that impressive, but I know that some people like that sort of thing. But to me, it was just kind of a, meh, whatever, I've done it before. Now, to its credit, this is a very substantial game, and it feels more like a sandbox in space than anything else, and it's definitely a far cry from the linear gameplay of the original Prey back in 2006, but to be honest with you, I kind of missed that. You know, you have to remember that Prey, in and of itself, had a freaking portal gun, and I do have to say that the zero-gravity environments in the original game were a lot more interesting than they are here. What is unique to this game that sets it apart from the previous game is that there are some decisions that you'll have to make here that do have consequences. Now, I'm not going to spoil anything for you guys, and that's why I always limit my gameplay footage to the initial couple of hours. But I will say this though, there are some decisions here and some surprises that happen that are actually pretty interesting. So that's always a good thing. But here's the thing, and I'm really torn between this. I have to weigh it by basically what the original game was. And I know that might not seem fair, but you know what? We don't have any other point of reference. And I know that this is kind of a reboot, but still, we do have to compare it to the original game. And one of the things that really holds this game back is I think that it suffers from an identity crisis. It's under the label of Prey, and yet it feels so much like a BioShock game, and in that respect I feel like I've already done this. There's also one other aspect of this game that's been nagging at me that I've been trying to quell ever since I put this in my PS4, but it simply won't go away, and that's the realization that this game seemed like it was a lot larger in scale with the original vision that they wanted to go with. And that is just killing me inside, because I can't get it out of my mind. Ultimately guys, and I know I'm probably going to get a lot of shit for this, but I do have to be honest in my review, and basically give my perspective on what I think about this game. And it seems to me like this game is a lot like Fantastic Four. No, it's not as bad as that, because this is actually an enjoyable game, but it seems to me like they had the license for this game, and they had to push something out. To me, it's almost like if they said, hey listen, whatever the hell you guys got in development, put a package on it, make it look pretty, and let's push it out. However, that's not to say that this isn't a well-refined package. It just means that they kind of compromised from their original vision just to get this out to market already. Now, of course, guys, before you blow up, that's just my personal opinion, and it doesn't mean that the overall package is not great, but it is lacking somewhat. Now, to me personally, I really didn't have a connection to this game like I did with the original Prey in 2006. And all it really ended up doing was making me nostalgic about the original game and wanting to go back and play it on my 360. And I don't know how I feel about that. But guys, don't get me wrong. Not everything is perfect in this game, and I do like some of the things that they did, but there are some other things that I kind of question. But it doesn't mean that it's a bad game, and you definitely should experience this. But just keep in mind guys, as cool as it sounds, this does feel like BioShock in space. And this is especially true if you just bought or rented or whatever the BioShock collection. This is gonna seem awfully familiar, and I think that's part of the problem. It's a little too familiar. Alright everybody, so that's my official review on the game Prey. As always, I thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next AGR's Pop Culture Reviews.